Welcome. It is week one of our document automation training camp. I'm super excited. We've had so many people who were able to register, who were able to get started, who were able to get hands-on with all of our week one content. My name is Micah Smith. I am responsible for our community and learning team here at Automation Anywhere. And I'm joined by my co-host. You can introduce yourself.
I'll say my name. All right.
Yeah.
Matt Stewart, my Director of Community and Learning here as well.
Awesome. So we're super excited to have a session with everyone. We want to answer your questions live. Where's everyone joining from is a great question to start with. So shout out where you're from. Kate is joining us from the Kansas City area. But yeah, super happy to have everyone. I know that this is kind of some like weird time zones for people all over the world. We tried to find the time that was the most appropriate for everyone, but that's almost impossible to do. So anyway, thank you so much for joining. Please put your questions in the chat. We want to make sure we have plenty of time to get to questions. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks and a recap of week one. We have a special guest joining us, and then we're also going to do some community shout outs. So we'll be taking questions throughout. Let's go ahead and transition to the screen because I want to talk through some of the week one content and do a quick recap. So if we think about week one, what is intelligent document automation? Well, we jumped into that this week. We did a quick recap of what we're going to be doing for the program. As we go through all these different courses, we're going to be working towards building a full end-to-end project. And that's a full end-to-end process. We're not building a task bot. We're not building a single task that calls another task. We're building a process. And this may be new for a lot of people who are joining, but we're using Process Composer. We're going to be using Copilot. We're going to show how all those interactions work. We got started with just 3 key things. And this was really like the start of our process. It's document acquisition. Where are our files coming from? Is it an API call? Are we grabbing them from a file server that we're monitoring? Is it grabbing them from an email inbox, or is it a form that we're allowing people to upload to? And then we also talked about document pre-processing, and we said, hey, in many cases, you need to clean up your images before you start to process them. So a lot of organizations still use fax machines. Yes, those are a real thing. And people fax in their images. The most common DPI for a fax server is 144 DPI. That's really low resolution. And so a lot of times you need to clean some of those images up because they don't come in so great. The other option is a lot of people are starting to take images that have been captured on mobile phones, and we need to crop those and we need to try to straighten them out. And so pre-processing can help with a lot of those things. And then finally, we talked about document classification. And we said that with document classification, we're trying to answer the question, what document is this? So that we can ultimately start to extract the data from it accordingly. So is it an invoice? Is it a purchase order? Is it a bill of lading? Is it some other document that we don't even have trained for? We need to be able to classify those incoming documents so that we can send them to the correct learning instance. So I know that this week one was a little bit of a surprise for people because the reality is we didn't even touch learning instances yet, right? That's huge into week two. We'll do a preview for that, but we didn't touch anything with learning instances. Right now, we're just focused on how do I get these documents into my system, into my process, and what can I do with them? So, Matt, I want to hear from you as you help to prepare some of this content, as you start to build it, as you were kind of working with our community this week and responding to things in the forum. What were some of the biggest aha moments that you saw, biggest surprises, either from yourself, from the community, from conversations you were a part of?
Yeah, so I came from document automation background in previous works. So when I was researching how we could best communicate automation anywhere, document automation, I asked some folks, how do they conceptualize it? What do you think about when you think about document automation? And most people are coming from that RPA mindset. TaskBot does all the work. I schedule it, it'll do the thing, right? It's going to grab a file and that's the end of it. And while that's one way that you can do it, it is definitely not the best way. So we spent a lot of time emphasizing the fact that if you start with a process-centric design, you can get a lot more flexibility and functionality and actually incorporate what you'll see in coming weeks, a full end-to-end human-enabled process to handle documents. And not just the document processing, but the end-to-end business process, right? We don't just do document processing for fun. We're doing it because we need to either open a loan or do some other business work. So getting that data out of it has to go somewhere, and putting it all into a process makes that possible.
I'll answer one of these questions myself. Anything that caused you trouble? Getting everyone their credentials and getting everyone their email with the week 1 kickoff. So we had, I'll be honest, an influx of people who signed up for our training camp, which is absolutely awesome. The logistics behind all of that, with working with an email marketing tool and then also working with our own automations that we've built for control room registration and getting people their emails. We will do better for next week. Some people didn't get their week 1 course materials. We will have that in the chat here. So please make sure that you check those links out. You can always also check our community. If you go to community.automationanywhere.com, you will see that when the next week posts, we will have a post right there that has the kickoff video, the course assignments for week 2, some tips and tricks, a link for the week 2 live stream, all of that stuff. So we are going to, if you didn't get the game plan for week 1, head to that link. That's exactly the link that the email leads to. Kate covered me up there. So check that link out. That will have all of the resources. I think is the biggest surprise that I see from people who are learning this content brand new is that, like, building a classification model seems really complex, but it's actually really easy with Automation Anywhere here. How many people in the chat have tried to build classification models in Python and TensorFlow before and been like, this is really complex and this is taking me forever and my results are still kind of sketchy, right? We've all done that TensorFlow Python tutorial that's like ham versus spam classification, and you spend all this time training and then all of a sudden, like, the results are still kind of mediocre. So the thing that I really like about what you can do here with classification and Automation Anywhere is you're basically coming up with your labeled training set, right? That's exactly what we provided you. A bunch of folders that had images or documents within them. That's the labeling. And then we're creating that model. And what happens is the model goes through the evaluation and then the prediction. And the evaluation happens when we pass a new document. When we were doing our testing, right? We pass that new document. We're asking that machine learning model to try to identify the patterns of what you think this is. Make a prediction for us. That prediction comes back in the sense of a confidence threshold. And that confidence threshold is what we were using to determine what's the accuracy of our classification model. And then you saw in that exercise that hopefully you all got hands-on with, but also that you saw on screen, we put in some documents that we knew would not classify with high confidence because we wanted to show you what it looks like when these things don't classify correctly. We purposely threw in documents that were totally unrelated to the training set just so that you could see exactly what that looks like when things misclassified. And to Matt's point about the end-to-end process, I need to think about that. Every document that comes into my workflow, I need to think about where it's going and how it gets handled. I can't just have a dead spot in my process where it's like, oh, that was a dead end and that document is unaccounted for, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about a real critical business process, we have SLAs. We need to know when things came in, what time they went out, and we need to make sure that everything was accounted for. And so what we're trying to teach in this 4-week session is, how do I build a robust process that can handle those things? So we're going to look at something when we get to the very end, week 4, when we do classification exception handling. All right, my thing didn't classify. What do? I need to pass that to an operator to review the classification. Maybe it had a low confidence threshold. Maybe it was a document that did not belong in this workflow at all. We need to make sure that everything is accounted for. And so that's what we're going to be showing throughout the rest of this training.
And if you think about what's coming next with learning instances and pulling data out, if you don't know what document it is, you can't send it to the right location for it to pull out the correct data. If it breaks in the beginning, the rest of the process is broken. Absolutely. So every single one of these pieces builds upon the previous step. So it is just classification right now, but process building and classification incorporation into that are going to be very important.
Absolutely. All right. Let's bring on this week's special guest. We are joined this week by Michael Guidry. Michael, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. You and I were previously rivals, and now we have come together to both work at Automation Anywhere. I used to work for Captiva, EMC, Input Excel. Michael, you were at?
I was at Kofax for 11
That's
years.
right.
Yeah. So big competitors. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited about this because, one, so much interest, right? We have a lot of people joining the live stream. And I think if you look at the content, you were just talking about and some of the things we're creating, it's just, a lot of new things we're adding to the product that I think that, our customers are going to like. And as we go through this course, as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of interesting new things I think that people are going to get to see. So I'm excited about it.
Michael, part of the genesis of some of this training was that you and I were having a lot of conversations that there were a lot of misconceptions about how to use document automation. What is IDP? How does this work? People kind of being stuck in this task bot dichotomy. Talk to me about some of those misconceptions that you're frequently hearing in the field.
Yeah, I think one of the most common ones is we talk about OCR, right? And people generally use OCR as a generic term for intelligent document processing. But OCR in itself is just one component of intelligent document processing, right? It converts an image into text, right? But what it actually doesn't do is give you context, right? It doesn't extract those fields that you're looking for to incorporate into a business process. And OCR itself, too, is just a toolkit for developers, right? It's the same thing if you look at some of the other tools in the market, for example, from the hyperscalers, right? These are application programmer interfaces for custom software developers to leverage that get technical outputs, right? You give it an image and it provides a technical output. I think what the market kind of does too is a little confusing is there's lots of different technologies out there, right? There are over 400 companies in the market that offer some sort of intelligent document processing capability. So I think as a customer, as an user, sometimes it's hard to kind of weed through these things. Specifically what we offer, and I think sometimes as you guys were talking about around, using task bots and things like that is, and maybe people aren't aware is, we have a pre-built solution. The whole reason why we built document automation was to be able to integrate these document extraction capabilities or field extraction capabilities directly into business processes, right? So this is part of our platform. You've got all the features and functions there to your disposal to be able to automate document intensive business processes without having to understand how, these different development tools work. So it's not OCR, right? OCR is just one of those components, but there's a lot more to it. And I think as you guys saw in the first week here, right, just talking about classification, that's a huge, time savings if you can automate that ingestion of those documents and determining, what type of document it is, where it needs to go, and things like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think, yeah, I mean, you're right. It has to be an end-to-end process. And a lot of people think of this as smaller task things. When they minimize it just to OCR, that's already a gigantic red flag that, that it's just about being able to turn images into text. So for sure, that's a really common one I hear about. As a reminder to everyone else, ask your questions in the chat. We are available to answer. Michael is an expert on our product, so we've got lots of people who can help chime in and give some answers. Michael, another thing that I hear about quite a bit is around straight-through processing, which I know is something that I never really heard about until more recently. Yeah. Is that straight-through processing is the measurement for the success of my implementation. Talk to me about that, because people think that if it doesn't go straight through the very first time or every single time, then something is broken.
Right.
How do you view that?
Yeah, that's my favorite term. I actually was having a conversation with a customer about this morning. So they were looking at their solution and measuring, the success of the solution through the straight-through processing metrics, which makes sense if you have a fixed number of fields, right? For example, if you have a fixed form, there's 5 fields on the form, things like that, because the straight-through equates to how many actual fields we extracted off the form. But when we have variable fields, so for example, documents with tables like an invoice, like in the case of this customer, they could have one document with, let's say, 1 line item, which might equate to 5 fields. Or they might have a document that's 20 pages that has hundreds or even thousands of line items, right? So that's thousands of fields. So contextually, those the time it would take to manually enter that one field document as opposed to those 1,000 field documents, much different. But straight through processing treats those as exactly the same, right? And statistically, that 15-page, 1,000-line document, it can't go straight through, right? It's just be impossible because OCR engines just aren't that accurate. But it doesn't mean there wasn't value there, right? If we could, for example, automate 95% of the extraction of the fields, and you only have to key in 5% of those, that's a huge time savings. So when we look at the success of these solutions, and especially as we get into building learning instances, it's really important as you're building those that you benchmark your field accuracy rate, or what I typically like to call the automation rate. And there's a couple reasons why. One is it'll help you determine where to focus your efforts. So if you have one field that's not working very well across your sample set, then focus there and try to make that one as accurate as possible. But secondly, when you look at the value of the solution, it's really in how many fields we can extract, because you can equate that to time savings. So generally we say it takes around 10 seconds per field to manually key it in. Well, if I've removed 10 seconds, many thousands of times, that's a really easy ROI calculation there, right? Because again, in the STP world, you could have 98, 95% of fields extracted properly, but 0% STP. So you may think, oh, the product doesn't work, right? Or it's not providing your value, but it actually is when you look at it from the field perspective.
And think about that. And if you're presenting to leadership about a solution that you've just built, and on one slide you've put a big 0% for a straight through processing, they're just going to go, okay, well, this doesn't work, go away. You've wasted all your time. But if you put in there, this technology solution has saved 95% of the time it used to take us to process a document. Those are identical solutions. One of them is telling the story that you need it to tell, and the other one is measuring some arbitrary goal that doesn't have any true bearing on what value it's generating.
Right. And I think too, even if you look at, let's say, for example, we're able to extract 50% of the fields, which from a technical standpoint doesn't sound that great, right? Mm-hmm. But if you look at it from a business context, if I'm able to eliminate 50% of the manual data entry, that's a 50% time savings, right? That's 50% of the costs that's taken out of the business. That could be a lot of value, especially when you have a large volume, large scale business process where you're processing these documents.
And in future sessions, when you're interacting with learning instances and you start to see how the UI works, you will see that the information that is extracted, when they highlight that, a user highlights that in the tool for validation, it shows them exactly where on the page it pulled it from. So even if it gets everything theoretically wrong or slightly typoed, the speed with which they're able to start extracting that information, and the fact that everything they extract goes right back into that process that you've automated, means that even with 0% straight through processing or 0% extraction, it's still going to save some level of time. Obviously, you're going to get better than a 0% extraction rate. These tools are really powerful, but even at the base level, just because you're incorporating it into an end-to-end process, it's still going to be adding value.
Right. And one last thing on STP to think about as well is that it doesn't consider if the data is valid from a business context standpoint, right? So we can extract, for example, data from an invoice, but that data could be wrong, right? The PO number could be wrong. The calculations on the invoice could be wrong. What you build in your learning instance is part of this is not just extraction, it is validating the data to make sure that's correct before it goes into your downstream business processes. So that affects STP, right? Because you're going to have a user stop and say, oh, yep, that's not right, right? That's not the right purchase order number, things like that. So, there's also a lot of value in how, accurate is the data we're extracting, not just, from an OCR standpoint, but from a business context standpoint.
Michael, one of the things that I recognize different with Automation Anywhere solution versus IDP solutions I've used in the past, and I want to get your feedback on. It seemed like before, whenever we were processing documents, and again, this is talking from my experience with Captiva and what became OpenText, it was read the data from the document, try to validate it if you can. You're going to have to write a lot of custom logic to do so. For us, it was in VB.NET. And then it's basically data delivery, and that's where the product ended, right? It was like, good luck, you're on your own. And sometimes that meant just dumping the document and the data into a repository someplace. Sometimes we were lucky and they had a content management system or something like Documentum in place. How does that differ from what Automation Anywhere offers?
Yeah, I've written a lot of VB script in my day. So yeah, I think if you look at I'll say traditional intelligent document processing solutions. If you look at the history of those solutions, they were born out of scanning, right? So, in the late 90s, et cetera, they were solutions that were focused on turning paper into electronic files that you put in your enterprise content management system to reduce physical storage. Over the years, they started to bring on what we now know as intelligent document processing. It started with basic zonal OCR, so you can get those fields, so you can easily put it in your ECM system and find it. And then, let's say mid 2000s, that's where we really got into kind of what we know today as IDP, where we're starting to process semi-structured documents and things like that. But the workflow inside those tools are very fixed, right? It's a linear process where you've got your ingestion points, you go through these steps, you might be able to pull things out, but there's only one path you can go. And then you have to do something with that, right? And typically that something was, to your point, putting in an enterprise content management system or some sort of workflow tool, right? Which usually was in the enterprise content management system. So what's different now, what you're seeing with a tool like Automation Anywhere, is we're looking at this more from a workflow standpoint, right? So, workflows aren't necessarily always document centric, but you may have workflows that contain documents. So if you look at it from that mindset of, let me look at the process and how I automate that end-to-end process. With Automation Anywhere, you can simply just plug in those steps to do the automation of the document, whether it be classification, the extraction of the data, the splitting, the human in the loop, and things like that. So it's giving you a lot more flexibility in the way in which you can actually process these documents and make it dynamic as well, because you're able to kind of route things in different places because it's not a linear process, right? In the process composer, right, you can make decision points and things like that you can't do with these traditional solutions, which again made sense in the context of where they were born, which was in the scanning world, which is a very linear process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the delivery is different too, right? When I'm at the end of my process, now it's like I can map it to any number of applications. I can do data validation with those different applications. I don't have to know VB.NET or some other obscure, lightly supported language to be able to do that. I'm essentially building a task bot, or in some cases, an API task to do that. We had a question pop up just a second ago. Let's bring that back up. Can you explain the difference between IQBot and document automation? Michael, I'm going to let you kick this off.
I can. So there's a couple reasons. So one, or a couple differences, and the main one is what I talked about earlier, which was that one of the reasons we created document automation is we wanted to make it part of the platform, right? We wanted to make it an integral part of your processes. So it's just a feature of the platform, whereas IQBot was a separate solution. So that's one of the main things. So architecturally, right, it's just embedded. You add it to your processes or your bots, wherever it makes sense. And then, of course, the incorporation of the process composer and things like that make it a little bit easier to manage as well. With IQBot, standalone solution, right? So you kind of had to plug that in. It was typically bot-driven as opposed to process-driven like we have with document automation. The other main differentiation, too, is just the technologies behind the scenes. So IQBot was more of the templated based, right? So kind of your structured documents and some of your semi-structured documents where you're creating these document-specific models and you're training documents. With document automation, we've brought in a lot of newer technologies, newer capabilities that support structured, semi-structured, as well as unstructured documents, right? A year ago, we launched one of the first GenAI solutions in the market for extracting fields from documents. So you have a lot more use cases you can support with document automation as well. A lot more options too, right? Because there just isn't one way to build a model inside of document automation. There's lots of different ways, right? There's lots of features. So you'll see that as you start building these learning instances is that, there may be 2 or 3 ways you could actually extract data from one document. It's a bit of an art, right? It takes a while sometimes to kind of go through that. But again, to summarize, there's 2 main differences. So the architecture, the way it's integrated in the platform, and then the features that are capabilities that are available in document automation.
Yeah, I think the architecture is the biggest one for me. The being able to build this as a part of a larger process and handle that exception in a much better way, cleaner, more consistent way, I think is huge. I think the build process is significantly improved too, as far as configuring and creating the learning instances. I think that's
it's
much
a lot less technical, right? You don't need to do Python scripting, right? You're not really building it in bots, right? That's all kind of done for you, right? And that's the value of having a platform, because you're not having to try to bring all these tools together, right? It's all part of the product.
Now, before we get the question, people will say, well, I used to be able to do this stuff in Python. How do I do that in Automation Anywhere with document automation? We will be addressing that. That's a week 3 topic. So I promise you we will get to that. We're going to talk to you about how to do data validation, how to manipulate the process that gets created by document automation. So we will be addressing that, and we're going to go through a really good use case for that as well.
And
let's bring up that last. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say that question that just came up on screen. That is a lot of the next 2 weeks. So there will be customized generative AI prompts that you will be able to experiment with for unstructured user-provided forms. So you'll be able to see what you can put in there to extract data. We can give examples now, but I think we'd be depriving you of being able to get hands-on and seeing it and experimenting with it in real time.
That's a great point. I do want to have Michael chime in on this, though, because this is something he and I have talked about before. How do you describe to people the difference between I'm just going to OCR a document, get a text file, and call an LLM myself versus what does document automation offer here and the value add from Automation Anywhere? Tough question, right? That's even harder than the one that was asked.
Yeah, we get that question a lot too, right? Because, perceptually, let's say you try ChatGPT and you just send it the document, you're like, hey, look, it extracts the document. But I think there's a couple of important things to understand there. One is ChatGPT, large language models, Gen AI, et cetera. Those are not solutions that are built to extract fields from documents, right? Because that's what intelligent document processing is. It's specifically designed and built to extract fields from documents. What Gen AI is built to do is generate content, right? So what you're doing is you're giving it the text and it's generating content from that text, which ideally is the field you're looking for, but sometimes it can be a lot of different things, right? It could be something that's not even in the document, depending on what model you use and things like that. So the complexities around using this technology to be able to extract fields it's hard, right? It's what we kind of do behind the scenes in document automation, right? We turn these tools into things that can support the extraction of fields. Because the reality is, that ChatGPT test that you did with that document, that's not something you can put in a production environment. One, because of course those tools are for developers, but secondly, it's not reliable enough, right? It's really hard to ensure that you're actually getting the results, or it's even returning results that aren't on the document. So we have a lot of logic behind the scenes, coupled with traditional IDP capabilities that use these technologies to make it and turn it into a field extraction solution that you then can validate the data to ensure that the information coming across is accurate, and that you can add humans in the loop with Automation Copilot to verify that.
One other fun thing, the fact that you can do regular field extraction and generative AI field extraction in the same process is very nice. Not having to wire those two types of technologies together in Python is very cool.
Yeah, and the reason we do that is, traditional IDP capabilities aren't going away, right? It's not like Gen AI has come in, it's going to replace everything, right? Doing structured zonal OCR still is probably the most accurate, right? It's cheapest, fastest, et cetera. And that makes sense for fixed forms. Like I wouldn't, take a fixed form and say, hey, let's go use a large language model. And what we've done in the product is we've coupled these two technologies together, as Matt mentioned. So for semi-structured documents, like an invoice, for example, there's really great invoice models out there. We have one. The Gen AI part just kind of gives it that little more automation, right? That little bump, less configuration, no training, those sorts of things. And then, of course, support for unstructured documents as well, using this technology, just opens up a white space of new use cases that, as a market, we couldn't support previously.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we're going to see that next week. That was a great teaser to week 2. In week 2, you're going to be building a learning instance off of a pre-trained document type. You're going to be building a learning instance off of a user-defined document, and you'll be building a learning instance off of an unstructured document. And what Michael was just describing, this user-defined document, that's where you can actually start to set up some of these aliases, but also use generative AI in combination with that more traditional extraction approach. So super excited for that. Please make sure that you take that week 2 training, because that's where it really gets into this week was like the hors d'oeuvre. We're getting into the main course next week, and it's a really fun part. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. If you still have questions for Michael, put them in the chat. We're going to do our best to address all of those after the session, but we're trying to keep things moving here. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Let's welcome Lou from our community team to do some community shout outs.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Lou, and I am another person behind the scenes of our Pathfinder community. And then shameless community promotion alert here. If you're not a member yet, please head over and join, because we have a lot of fun, informative stuff happening each week. And yeah, so
Let's do some shout out. Let's show that
let's-
screen. Maybe. There it is.
Awesome. So I wanted to take a moment to just shout out some of the buzz we're getting in the community and on social.
Did we lose Lou at this impactful moment?
Right at the pinnacle of the community shout out.
Well,
There. All
there
right,
you
you're
go.
back.
Welcome
Okay.
back, Lou.
Hi. Okay. So yeah, if you haven't contributed yet, please head over and do so, because your insight is supporting our other members in figuring out different ways to use document automation and things like that. So we have some folks that made a huge shout out to the Automation Anywhere team for creating such a remarkable product. They said our hard work is paying off. So thank you for that. We have some folks who went ahead and completed the week 1 game plan on all 4 topics. This was at the beginning of the week, so this was a huge deal. They sort of knocked it out as soon as they got it going. That person is one of our MVPs. And then one thing someone is looking forward to is expanding their understanding of how document automation can streamline workflows, improve efficiency, and reduce manual errors in document processes. So that is definitely something that we will be going over in the upcoming weeks. We have someone excited about mastering intelligent document processing with Automation Anywhere, especially using AI and machine learning to extract and classify and validate data from unstructured documents. And then finally, the thing someone else is looking forward to learning in the upcoming weeks is to understand and implement document automation into end use cases. And so that's another reason we really push everyone to dive in and share what they're excited about and how they'll be using document automation, because it really does help the full community see different use cases and how to apply some of the things we're talking about the next 4 weeks.
Very cool. So appreciate those shout outs. Again, you can join us on the community forums at community.automationanywhere.com. Also, give us a shout out on LinkedIn or social media. Tag Automation Anywhere. Use the hashtag DATC. We're going to be able to recognize all of our community members. Tell us about your accomplishments. Share your feedback. We want to make this training as effective and impactful for everyone as possible. Let's take maybe 1 or 2 more questions if we have them. Otherwise,
quick, Mike,
we will
I did want to
Yeah.
do one small shout out. I've been watching some of these chats, and thank you to all of the community members who are answering questions for us, for other folks. It's really nice to see the community helping out.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. So let me give a preview for week 2 real quick. In week 2, we're going to start building real learning instances. And like I was mentioning, this is where you're actually getting hands-on with document automation. This is where you're starting to run some of the OCR stuff. This is where you're starting to use Gen AI. I think that these next courses are the most interesting, the most hands-on focused, because they give you the opportunity to see how this stuff works. We're giving you sample files. We're giving you sample files that work and sample files that fail, because we want you to see how you set up these different learning instances, how you tune them, and how you make adjustments to fix the things that aren't working maybe at the first try. If we just gave you clean files that worked every single time, first time through, no tweaking, no adjustments, that would be a bit misleading, I think. So we've given lots of different files that will work, that will not work, that will need some tuning, some adjustments. Even the Gen AI extraction when you're working with an unstructured document, that course is excellent. And I'm super excited for you guys to try that out. So please make sure that you're on the lookout for our week 2 email. That should be coming, I don't know what time it will be, Monday for some people, Sunday night for other people. But we're going to make sure that everyone who signed up and who registers gets that link, is able to try that stuff out. Again, you can always hit our community forum at community.automationanywhere.com, and you'll be able to see the week 2 posting as well. That will be going live Sunday. So if you want to get a head start on it before the email actually comes, you can check there. So yeah, thanks everyone so much for joining. We will do our best to answer all of the questions that are in the chat that we didn't get to address live afterwards. But I appreciate you guys joining. I appreciate your time. Please make sure to join us next week, next Thursday, same time. We'll be doing a similar segment where we're going to do a recap on week 2, and we'll have another special guest and some more community shout outs. So thanks everyone so much for joining, and we'll see you next week.